Native Land Pod is a production of iHeart Radio in partnership with Reason Choice Media.
Welcome.
Welcome home, everybody. This is Angela Rye, Andrew Gillum, and Tiffany Cross, and you're tuned into this week's MiniPod. Hey, y'all.
What up?
Okay, so there's a whole thing. Donald Trump has some black friends. Not many, but a few. And one of them, as you all know, who went to school in Florida and spent some time at FAMU, Andrew. How about this rattling some nonsense, as Tiff would say. Byron Donald out here talking about black folks were better under Jim Crow. And as we know, he is a potential running mate for Donald Trump. He's not the only potential black friend that Donald Trump is looking at, allegedly. There's Ben Carson. There is Tim Scott. And I heard Clarence Thomas might even consider leaving the Supreme Court for this role, which I'm just playing. But, birds of a feather. So why not? And then there's also been some conversation about Marco Rubio and some others. But one of the things that I thought was most interesting recently, I know Tiff doesn't love polls, but sometimes I like some of these numbers. This was interesting that a majority of black voters said they would be less likely to vote for Donald Trump if he chose any of the three black men frequently mentioned as potential vice presidential candidates. Again, this is from the USA Today Suffolk University poll. Three black men they said they would be less likely to vote for him for.
That's right. Ben
Carson, Tim Scott, and Byron Donalds. So, what y'all think about that?
I mean, people know they caping, basically. And I don't think there's any real chance that any of the three of them end up being seriously considered here, let alone becoming the vice presidential nominee, because as far as Donald Trump is concerned, they work for free. Why would he pay them? Why would he promote them? Why would he give them?
Who you think he's gonna get then? If it's not Donald, it's not Carson, it's not Scott. Who you think he's gonna get?
Well, latest reporting has Governor Burgum from North Dakota, J.D. Vance, senator from Ohio, and Marco Rubio as being his top finalist under consideration for the seat, considering that he needs to bring in, if you will, that faction of mainline Republicans who are, I guess you could put them in the camp of the former vice president, who basically said, I can't be with them anymore.
Mainline.
What do you call them? Sort of mainline?
Mainstream? What? Not J.D. Vance.
I don't think any of them are mainstream.
Marco Rubio's on the fringe. On the fringe.
I think they're kind of. He's not on the fringe. I mean, first of all of them had a different story to tell.
Yeah.
When they were running against them, that back in 2016, right. All of them had a different set of insults. Except now, all of them have capitulated. I mean, they are hook, line, sinker right there with them. But those reportedly are the kind of top three leading contenders. And I don't know why Elie Mystal from New York is not more mentioned there, other than the fact that Trump can't abide a woman beneath him. I don't know.
Oh, that might be the only place he could find a woman. But carry on, Tiff. What do you think about this?
I have to be honest. I don't spend a lot of time thinking about Trump or his VP stakes. I think it doesn't matter who he picks. The people who are a member of his cult, he could name Ronald McDonald as his running mate. It's not going to impact who votes for him or how. I certainly don't pay attention to the polls talking about how they care about he votes. He has not expanded his reach, nor has he seemed to narrow his reach. And the vice president, quite frankly, is a pretty superfluous position. And in recent history only have we seen it carry more significance with Mike Pence, who, pursued certifying the election results. And with Vice President Kamala Harris, was people giving her outsized. Well, she wasn't never vice president.
No, I think she ruined. I mean, I think that was one of those examples of a consequential choice, if there ever was one. I mean,
Well,
Yeah.
but I guess the point I'm making is the actual position of vice
the
president
role
is
itself.
right.
I hear
It's
you.
pretty
I hear you.
superfluous. Like you don't have a lot of responsibility. I think we saw that change under Vice President Kamala Harris. And my point about Mike Pence was, what did he really do other than choose to certify the election results? So I don't know that it
He
really
looked
matters.
very earnestly in most scenes. You know, he just
I
sort of
mean,
looked real
it
earnest.
could not matter, but I also think, I mean, for me, I'm a political. I love this stuff, and I think it's interesting to talk about, you know, who are the options and what made them become options, right? Like it's like, okay, Donald Trump is trying to make inroads with the Black community. I think there are some folks, including surprisingly so many mainstream outlets that are taking this story on and running with it with no factual data to support this influx of Black men who are, you know, loving on Donald Trump in ways that they cannot prove. But it is fascinating to see him have 3 potentials on the short list. I know you said, Andrew, that Elie Stefanik's on there. She's on in this Political article that just came out yesterday. She actually is on this short list, and so is Tom Cotton. So I think a lot of these folks are not so moderate. It's a lot of extreme people on this list.
I don't think. I think when I said mainline, what I was attempting to communicate, but you know, I mess words up and stuff. What I was attempting to communicate was that one, not mainstream, but mainline Republican, meaning the traditional defense,
Fiscal
faith.
conservative.
Yeah, you know, sort of mainline Republican could see themselves reflected. It is what Pence sort of did for him, you know, the first go round. Evangelicals, you know, held their noses supposedly, although I think they went full head first in, and I think they still are there. I think it is worth it to assess or at least interrogate how it is that each of the Black individuals who were mentioned as being real contenders here, I think for all intent and purpose, and I guess the reporting I saw was maybe 16 hours ago, I think, where it talked about him having reduced his list down to 3. And if that is true, none of those 3 are any of the Black candidates who had been bandied about. I just think it's a flirtation, but it's never a real commitment.
Yeah.
And I think that's his whole thing to the extent that he goes the distance of flirting with Black folks, there's never a date. And that date then never leads to anything really real. And by the way, I'm totally fine with that.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, one thing that I think is interesting, and you talked about this earlier, Tiff, I'm curious to know your feedback on this. The folks that have gone back and forth for Trump, like when they're not on the ticket or not being considered for the ticket, when they're running against him, even in campaigns where they're not on the, like when J.D. Vance was running against the record of Donald Trump, he called him America's Hitler. Yeah. Right. Marco Rubio, at one point, he and Donald Trump were at each other's throats and he was little Marco. Right. Like there are these moments, and then you just see them take this pivot. I've always said, I'm like, what does he have on these people to make them take these hard 180s? It is astonishing to me. With Ted
Cruz, he basically rented out his wife, and this man is caping for him day in and day out in the U.S. Senate.
Absolutely. So I think these are some of the things that are fascinating to me. I wonder what some of the gaps would be in on Donald Trump's ticket. Like, what does he need to fill? I know that it probably now would be good to not be convicted of any serious crimes, especially given ones that involve your integrity, veracity, trust. I'm thinking too about you talked about mainline is different to you, but there may be someone who's more moderate. There's a whole never Trump cohort of Republicans that allegedly still exists. So is that a role he needs to play? Does he need to look like he's unifying the party, even with his daughter-in-law over at the RNC now? What is the requirement to ensure that they have a viable ticket versus Biden and Harris?
I don't think moderate's real in the Republican Party anymore. I don't think it is a value. I don't think it is a goal. I don't think people make it a trajectory, a place by which to aim and aspire to. Yeah. I don't think it exists, and I don't think it is merited anymore within the party. To the extent that it ever was, absolutely right now, it's not even merited. To be that is to be a rhino, a Republican in name only, as far as I'm concerned. I will say I do have a question as to whether or not it's legal for Donald Trump to choose Marco Rubio, being that they are both from the same state. And I haven't looked deeply into this. Tiff, I know you are obviously our resident journalist here, but the 12th Amendment, sort of directly goes at the electors not being from the same states, the president and the vice president. And so I
had no idea. This is the first time I
never
didn't
heard
know
that either.
The president could not pick a vice president from the same state. But that's in the Constitution?
Yeah, the 12th Amendment.
I had no idea.
I didn't know neither. I'm like, and I took constitutional law.
I'm going to read while we talk. Did not choose a president before the first day of the presidential term. The individual elected vice president would act as president.
What we could do is we can leave this and I can ping Elie Mystal to see if he'd be willing to to answer. Let me see if I can just call him really quick. I'm just going to ask him if he was in a video, because we can be like, you know what, now we done got confused. We don't know who Trump is going to pick. But we do have somebody we got
expert.
Our legal expert. Let me see if I can call him real quick to see if he'll do this. 1 second.
Hi, I'm Elie Mystal, and Andrew brought up something that I had not thought about. Marco Rubio, the thirsty senator from Florida, probably cannot be the vice president for Donald Trump, the convicted felon from Florida. The problem is the 12th Amendment. Now, I think of the 12th Amendment as the Hamilton musical amendment. You see, at the founding, the vice president was the person who finished second in the presidential election. It's fine in a world that has no parties. But in the real world, the second place runner-up to the president is a rival of the person who actually won the presidential election. So the rule is somewhat obviously stupid. Now, if you've seen Hamilton the musical, you'll remember that Aaron Burr, right after he gets his ass kicked by Thomas Jefferson, kind of pathetically says, "Oh, Mr. Jefferson, I look forward to serving as your vice president." And Jefferson says coldly, "That's a dumb rule, but we can change it. You know why? Because I'm the president." And that is the essence of the 12th Amendment. Now, it didn't happen in real life like it happened in the musical, but in 1804, at the behest of then-President Thomas Jefferson, the 12th Amendment was passed and ratified, and it specified that the president and the vice president would run on the same ticket and be voted for at the same time. And that is the system that we still have today. But there was a catch. The very first line of the 12th Amendment reads, "The electors shall meet in their respective states and vote by ballot for president and vice president, one of whom, at least, shall not be an inhabitant of the same state with themselves." What that means in actual English is that the president and VP can both be from the same state, but the electors from the Electoral College, the people who do the actual voting, the electors cannot vote for a president and VP who are both from the state of the elector themselves. In the Trump-Rubio context, that means that if they ran together, even if Trump won Florida, Florida's electoral votes could not go to Donald Trump. Not that the electoral votes of Florida have ever been important in a presidential election before, right? I'm obviously referencing the 2000 presidential election between George W. Bush, and Al Gore. But this 12th Amendment issue actually almost came up during the 2000 election race. Back then, Bush's VP pick, Bush's VP pick, Dick Cheney, were both residents of Texas, right? That fact could have cost Bush Texas's electoral votes. So at the very last minute, Dick Cheney changed his residency from Texas, where he was living, to Wyoming, where, in fairness, he had a vacation house and had previously been that state's congressperson, right? So Cheney switched his residency to avoid the 12th Amendment issue. Now, I'm sure little Marco, who is so desperate to lick Trump's boots, would be happy to claim residency in any other state to allow him to be VP. The problem is, Rubio isn't just a resident of Florida, he's the state's senator. So it's pretty hard for him to claim all of a sudden that he actually lives in another state when he's the representative from Florida. I don't think it's going to matter because I don't think Rubio is going to be picked. Personally, I still think Tim Scott is the leader in the clubhouse. Tim Scott is currently a resident of the sunken place, so the 12th Amendment shouldn't apply. But it is interesting, right? It's interesting that Rubio has debased himself for a position that he probably won't ever be picked to fill because of this 12th Amendment problem. If only Marco Rubio had ever read just once the Constitution of the United States of America.
Okay, so we had to tap in our constitutional law expert, Elie Mystal, because we got confused. Andrew done got me confused. He told me something was illegal. And then it kind of does look illegal, but it's not illegal. It just could mess up a whole election,
Not
which
prohibitive.
is just as important as being illegal. So we had to ask Elie.
Elie Mystal, who's a writer at The Nation, but also one of your favorite political analysts. You can see him on all the networks. And he is also obviously a lawyer.
So this could equal complete ludicrosity, or it could be a really great constitutional
No, this is
law
a
exercise.
great, like, this is so much better than Trump sweepstakes to me, because the thing that we don't, the thing that we have to start paying attention to is there are random crazy things that have never happened in history over the last 4 years, starting in, and really before that, starting with his election, with Trump's election in 2016. He started with a Muslim ban, right? Like, there are all kinds of crazy things that are happening that are ahistorical. Now this man is running for president. The first time ever there's a Supreme Court case. I just hit a bush. That's not real. Sorry, Bush. But I mean, now we talking about the bushes. Anyway, let me just say this. Now we are also having to consider whether or not a president needs complete and full immunity. That is what we're up against. So we need to know all of the potential factors. There was an insurrection on Capitol Hill. Like, we have to know all of the things that could happen, because all of the things keep happening. So Andrew, I love
is the vice president a voting member, or is he a figurehead?
Yes.
No, I mean, that to your point around the questions that we never had to interrogate before because the system never got stretched that far.
Yes.
With Donald Trump in formula, with him in play,
everything's
of the
on the table.
all the guardrails, everything we thought was sacrosanct and just obvious, it just isn't.
That's exactly right. So I'm so glad that, one, we had an on-ramp into Trump sweepstakes, which Tiff couldn't give a damn about. But we ended up somewhere in a constitutional law question, having to look at the 1800s for when this thing might have even applied. And then still not completely clear, but thankful to Elie, our lifeline. We got it worked out. And if not, we want to hear from y'all. You guys are constitutional law experts at home. Some of y'all out here, TikTok experts. Some of y'all actually went to law school like me and still might not know. I want to hear from all of y'all. We want to hear from all of y'all, because Native Land Pod is a space where you can not only send in your questions, but also send in your answers. And you might want to know why we even got into these weeds. Welcome to our nerd lives. That's what we do out here. But we really, really appreciate you all. Please remember to rate, review, subscribe, and definitely tune into our regular episodes, which drop every single Thursday. Welcome home, y'all.
Welcome home. Native Land Pod is a production of iHeart Radio in partnership with Reason Choice Media. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.